Hi, Suzanne. How are you feeling?
I haven't been feeling too well. I've been drowsy all week and running a fever. Quick question. How long is diarrhea supposed to last?
How about we start with a blood sample? Ouch! The needle poked me. I'm sorry. I have to go. We have protocol.
Don't worry, everything's gonna be okay.
We just need to check your vitals.
I examined the samples you gave me, and it seems the patient was positive for HIV. Unfortunately, the virus was passed on to Nurse Jackie. Here's what's happening in her body.
Let's take a look at what happens when HIV is in your body. Once HIV is in your body, the defenders in your blood do their best to protect you. They try to destroy HIV just as they would the flu or any other virus. Your defenders are called your immune system. CD4 T cells are part of the immune system's defender cells. They protect you against some viruses and other invaders. But HIV turns the tables and attacks CD4 T cells. When you first get HIV, there's a lot of it in your blood. What happens is that HIV invades your CD4 T cells. Then it multiplies inside the cell and breaks out of the CD4 T cell. The HIV viral load in your blood goes up. Then HIV kills the CD4 T cells. Your CD4 T cell count goes down and you have fewer defenders.
So what happens now?
Well, we have to follow OSHA guidelines.
Exposure to blood or other infectious materials, OPIM, is common in certain fields such as healthcare. Blood or OPIM can transmit pathogens that can be harmful to those exposed. OSHA Standard 1030 provides a procedure for what the employee and employer should do after an exposure. An exposure incident is when blood or OPIM comes in contact with a person's mucous membranes or non-intact skin. If someone is exposed to blood or OPIM, there are a few immediate steps that should be taken. First, the exposure incident should be immediately reported to the employer. Reporting an incident is crucial because it allows the employer to identify hazards and prevent incidents from reoccurring. Following a reported exposure incident, the employer must conduct an exposure determination. An exposure determination is required under the bloodborne pathogen standard. The exposure determination will include a list of all the jobs in which all the employees are exposed to blood or OPIM. It will also include a separate list of all the jobs in which some of the employees are exposed to blood or OPIM, as well as a list of all the job tasks which involve exposure to blood or OPIM. The employer is required to report any occupational exposure incidents to OSHA. The employer must begin an evaluation of the exposure, which may include blood samples from the individual who is the source of the possible bloodborne pathogen. Blood samples must be taken from the source and tested for HIV and HBV. The results of the blood test will be disclosed to the employee. In addition, a medical evaluation of the employee must be conducted by a licensed healthcare professional. The medical evaluation must be provided to the employee for free. The medical evaluation will be completely confidential. The medical evaluation may include taking blood samples from the employee to identify the risk of infection to the employee. If deemed necessary, post-exposure prophylaxis may be prescribed. Post-exposure prophylaxis includes taking medications to prevent an infection after an exposure incident. There must also be a follow-up evaluation of the employee. The follow-up evaluation is performed to make sure the employee is not showing any symptoms of infection related to the exposure. The follow-up evaluation is also time for educating the employee on the implications of their exposure. Lastly, the employer has 15 days to provide the employee with a written evaluation of the exposure incident. Under the bloodborne pathogen standard, the medical evaluation must include a written opinion. Written opinion should include the results of the medical evaluation and any potential further medical treatment. Only information pertaining to the exposure incident will be included in the written opinion. The employee can decide if they want to pursue further treatment.
This hierarchy of controls explains how to remove or diminish hazards found in the industry. There are 5 main sections, and today we will review each one. Each section helps to avoid coming in contact with bloodborne pathogens in the first place. This concept is taught to managers in certain industries to be used as a standard in the workplace. In the scenario with Nurse Jackie, elimination and substitution controls are not realistic. However, we will still go over their definitions. Elimination, the most effective option, involves physically removing the hazard from the area of operation. Substitution, the second most effective method, involves replacing something that may produce a hazard. We will now begin with the third section for hierarchy of controls. Engineering controls. Engineering controls work by isolating hazards instead of eliminating them. Economic cost of engineering controls can be rather expensive. However, in the long run, future costs will be reduced. In relation to bloodborne pathogens, examples of engineering controls include sharp disposal containers, self-sheathing needles, and medical patches. Next up, we will go over administrative controls. Administrative controls change the way people work. Hospitals use different training methods, procedures, and /or warning labels. Here on the screen, we can see the process of administrative controls in the form of online training. The nurse is learning important safety measures and being quizzed on them. In-person demonstrations may further prevent future accidents. Lastly, we have PPE. Personal protective equipment is the least effective way of controlling hazards. Workers can damage or choose not to use the equipment, rendering it useless. Here's an instructional video that shows the use of PPE.
Bloodborne pathogens are the most common and dangerous occupational hazards faced by you, the healthcare worker. Infections from pathogens such as hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and the human immunodeficiency virus HIV cause serious and even life-threatening diseases. But the proper use of personal protective equipment, such as gloves, gowns, masks, and eye protection, can significantly reduce your risk to exposure to blood and other potentially infectious materials. Remember that even when other safety controls are employed in your facility to eliminate or minimize bloodborne pathogen hazards, PPE remains your last line of defense to potential exposure. And the success of that defense is literally in your hands.